Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Fall for the Wall. My name is Issa, and as per usual, we're going to be talking about climbing things. A bit of a change of location. We're outside. It's pretty nice out. Not to mention, just because of the time I'm filming this video, though, the sun is like piercing currently where I'm looking. In terms of like my bedroom, so I thought I'd take you guys outside. Hopefully, you guys are surviving final season. This is the second to last video for the spring semester. I really appreciate all of you guys hanging along with the series. It's been super exciting. Definitely look out for the video next week. It's going to be super interesting, super fun. Some of you guys might really enjoy these interesting breakdowns in terms of climbing concepts, but definitely going to be some fun stuff in the next video in terms of actually seeing climbing. It's going to be very much reflective of our video from the beginning of the semester where we climbed at Tufas. So just look out for that video next week. But yeah, bear with me in terms of the sound outside. But it's going to be a pretty casual video today. We're going to be talking about the development of indoor climbing, more like food for thought and an interesting concept more so than anything else. I didn't want to show some people in case they're like stressed or like if they're drinking a ton of like coffee. Right now I am. I've been getting a bunch of like iced coffee and whatnot or like mochas. So if you have seeds, I definitely recommend making like a mini greenhouse to plant them in. You probably can't see it super well, but like I'm growing kale right now in this Dunkin' cup. And they're really good for that. They sprout really quickly. It keeps the moisture in, so you don't need to worry about watering them too often. But that's a total aside. I definitely recommend doing this. Save your coffee cup, get some soil, plant your seeds, and watch them grow. Yeah, but anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the development of indoor climbing. So, what some of you might not realize is climbing that we see it today has evolved rapidly. The reason being, the first indoor wall that we, or in the first indoor gym that we actually saw, that was first made by Gary Rall. I'm pretty sure it's Rall is the last name of him, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyways, he made it after he had been traveling and he saw these climbers. He was like, "Oh, how are you guys like training? You guys are super strong." And they literally had an outdoor wall where they had stuck on stones and were top roping on it. And it wasn't anything that like we see today in terms of like we have all these different hold types and different textures and colors and all these different things that we have now in terms of indoor climbing. That wasn't the case for what they did outside, where they literally like, I'm gonna take these stones, I'm gonna glue it to the wall, we're gonna climb it, it's a top rope. Phenomenal, great. And Gary saw it and he was like, cool, this is actually a really interesting idea, because indoor climbing was meant to train for outdoors. And which is crazy because a lot of people that climb indoors now, they don't even like, some of them don't even think about climbing outside, which is totally fine. You don't need to. The great thing about indoor climbing is that it has made climbing really accessible to a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't be able to get the gear and transportation needed to go ahead and climb outside. But originally, indoor climbing was made as a training tool for outdoor climbing, whereas now indoor climbing has taken on a life of its own. So in the gym, you might hear like, "Oh, he's pretty old school," or "an old school climber," that sort of thing. Or you just might hear conversations about the way like indoor climbing has been developing. So we talk about things like just gyms in general. I think there are over 60 planning to open throughout 2021, which is huge. That is a lot of gyms, especially given that we're coming out of a pandemic. I know that recently there's the Cliffs at Harlem just opened. That's up in New York, but that's a gym that just opened. So there's that, which is really interesting. So food for thought. And gyms are becoming more and more competitive. They're offering more and more things. They're becoming very synonymous to just like a fitness gym, which is great in some aspects and not so much in others. So some people that just want to climb, right? They go, well, why is my membership higher? Like, I understand I have access to like a fitness area and yoga classes and and showers, etc. But for people that just want to climb, they're like, well, maybe I would prefer a membership that isn't quite as expensive as ones that are adding all these other things. But then you keep in mind the fact that we have these spaces that need to be competitive within the market, and that there are a whole wide range of variety for what people want. So the fact that stylized, sleek, monochrome walls, same color walls, originally like it was just training for outdoors, so people just used what they had to make the space suit that need. Whereas now the style of climbing indoors has changed too. We see more parkour style moves, big volumes instead of like tiny crimping holds. It's a lot of it's like, besides calling it like parkour esque, run and gun style, comp style. Sorry, my neighbor's fan just kicked on, so I'll try to talk a little bit louder. But all those different things adding up to something that isn't as reflective of the outdoors as some people want, but it makes it fun in different ways, pushing your body in a more gymnastic styled way that you might not really have thought of before. And there are gyms that are still setting in a way that is definitely reflective of the movements you see outdoors, but there are also other gyms that are incorporating that compy sort of style that might not be seen outdoors. Usually you're not going to see this crazy running jump, like feet coordination, big volume, weird tension, like dyno move. Like, I just said a whole bunch of words because it's very parkour styled. Whereas, like, that's something that's newer because the first climbing indoor gym only opened 33 years ago. So that's one thing. Or we see the discussion of taped holds versus the same color hold when people make routes or problems when they make climbs for indoor gyms. It used to be just use whatever hold you had, tape it, throw it on the wall, and follow that route. Whereas now it's like, okay, let's make our space look pretty. Let's make it look nice. Let's make it look sleek. So we have these routes that are set with only the same color hold all the way up, which has its pros and cons. It's like, okay, this is very easy to see and understand, like very easy to understand. It looks nice. Those are all great. Some people are like, well, what about the diversity within the holds? That changes things. I can make it like teach people less to like really read the route when they're approaching a problem. That's one of the arguments you might hear. Then the fact that along with having more and more gyms open, the more and more regulations you might have for insurance and standards and safeties. Climbing is an inherently like dangerous sport. The word safety isn't something we really associate with it, and because of that, we're mitigating all these risks. And so the way that someone comes in knowing how to belay, the way that has become more standardized going forward, it has its pros. You understand the baseline skill, right? There's this idea that this is the bare minimum of what you need to know in order to do this in a way that best mitigates those dangers. But on the other side, it's people that come in with all this experience outdoors doing X, Y, and Z, and maybe their way isn't valid in that gym, which might be really frustrating because you've been doing it for so long and maybe you've had no issues with it. And you go, well, part of it is when you're outside, you're navigating it with you and your friends, and you have to make those judgment calls yourself. And you're not really underneath anyone else's protocols. And hearing that can be really upsetting, especially given maybe it was valid, or maybe it was valid 10 years ago. And now it's frustrating to hear that, like someone telling you, oh, basically that's wrong. Or the fact that the idea of what you're learning is going to translate to outside, and most people don't know the original style, like some of the original things in terms of climbing, or how to set up an anchor, those things. The mentorship aspect of that, the climbing community is super supportive and stuff, but are you going outside? The attempt was to go outside, so there was like a mentorship sort of relationship with people wherein they would take you outside maybe like 30, 40 years ago, and they were teaching you. Whereas now there are instructors that can teach you what you need to know, and that is totally great for a multitude of reasons. But it makes it difficult in other ways. So those are just some of the things that have been changing in terms of being indoors. We have speed climbing. It's one single route set across the world that people go up as fast as they possibly can, and it's completely different than top rope or lead, sport climbing, and bouldering. Just because of the way it's one thing that you train for, and it's how fast can you go. the sprint going vertical? These are really interesting questions and things to think about when you're in your indoor climbing space. The fact that because there are more and more people now going into climbing gyms than ever before, how do you suit the needs to all these people? Or the fact that it's becoming more popular, how do you start navigating things we've never had to navigate before? All right, conversations about diversity, and whether things are inclusive, the spaces that we represent, having discussions about how we are treating the land we stand on. It is indigenous land, and oftentimes climbers go outside, not realizing that the spaces they occupied they're not ours. They're not our lands, they're indigenous lands that were taken from them. And that conversation of respecting that land and understanding where you're climbing and the respect that needs to go to, the education that comes along with that. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes along with the fact that indoor climbing is really new, but it's seeing these jumps and leaps in its progression and how we see it. It went from this is a tool to train outside, like outdoors, to genuine being a sport in and of itself. If you climb indoors, you might not be able to climb the same thing outdoors because the moves might be really different. Some of the things that you see indoors are just not the same when you go outside. And you face different challenges in there. And I definitely recommend doing both, trying both out. They're both very respectable, and they've just become different, which is great. And I think indoors is still a great tool to train for outdoors. Outdoor climbing can be really difficult. I just went top rope climbing outdoors with some of my friends, and I was totally gassed after some of those climbs. And there's no other feeling when you're outside because it is very humbling, right? So some of the things that have changed in gyms is that you used to have these movable pads in some of them, right? Where to put them whenever you're climbing in terms of bouldering. Whereas now a lot of gyms have just standardized it, taken out those pads and made thicker mats so that no one has to worry about moving them, in terms of the fact that less people know how to move those pads correctly for judgment calls in terms of their falls. But that's really important when you go outside bouldering, because if you don't have a crash pad and you don't position it properly, where you're landing becomes, there's a higher risk for injury, for danger. People not knowing how to use certain types of devices, belay devices, when they go inside versus outside because their gym only has required one. So it's just a very interesting transition in knowledge and style. I definitely think that it's really great food for thought, if nothing else. And I just definitely recommend you guys like kind of think about like what you think is great about it and what you think is maybe we're taking a misstep with it. Just like everything else, it has pros and cons. I don't think this is a right or wrong solution. I think at the end of the day, we just need to be aware of the environments we're interacting with. I hope you guys enjoyed this video today. Thank you for sticking with me outside. New environment, new sort of thing. Had a minor spiel about my plants. I love gardening. I'll see you guys next week with Kate. Look out for that video. It's gonna be super cool. And good luck with finals, guys. Bye-bye.